Libby, tell us a little about when you learned that you had this hearing loss. At what stage in your life did you have this? Did you learn about your hearing loss, and how did that happen?
I suspect that I have had hearing loss since I was born. It may have been progressive. Um, this was in Old Williamsburg in the early 1970s, and a lot of disabilities, so to speak, were considered taboo, and they weren't something to be addressed. People were actually hiding their children. That was the generation and the sign of the time. When I was about 2.5 years old, I had a very special great aunt, my grandmother's sister, who noted that something was not quite the way it should be. And she said something to my mother, and she was the one who mentioned it. And that's when they had me diagnosed. By today's standard, 2.5 years old is considered very late. Now they're diagnosing babies from birth. But that was when we started the journey when I was about 2.5 years old. And
Wow.
I was fitted with hearing aid, and my mother was very proactive, and we went right into speech training, and that's how we started off. It was very, very difficult in the beginning, but my mother said one thing, that I was going to be treated like everybody else.
Hmm.
And that was her mantra.
Wow. In what way did she treat you like everybody else?
In many ways, it was interesting because in many ways I resented it. But now, of course, looking back at this point in my life as a mother and a grandmother, um, I saw that this was what needed to be done. I was mainstreamed into the Base Yaakov of Williamsburg. At that time, the Base Yaakov was still there, and I still remember it in South 8th Street. There was a Jewish school for girls that had started when a lot of people came from Europe in the 40s after the war, and then they started different schools. And we started out there in the Base Yaakov of Williamsburg. I She made sure that I knew everything that was going on. Later on, as I got into middle school, she would copy all the notes over. For example, Hebrew translation. So she would sit there, and my father and my mother would write and translate everything and then give it to me so that I was prepared for school the next day. And when I think about that, the hours of work that they put in, besides everything else, it's really mind blowing. I'm not going to say it was easy street. In many ways, I find two parts to it. Part of it is that just living with some kind of a loss, whether it's a disability or something, it's always a challenge. It doesn't matter where you are, what you are, who you are. It's always a challenge. It's something that you live with. But what was even more challenging in those days was that there was no such thing as children who had different needs to be in a mainstream classroom, and that was very challenging. I do have to say that I had very, very special girls in my class, and to say that they were friends with me, yes, but tolerated me, yes, because I was not easy. The communication was difficult. You could not understand me. And if I was in kindergarten, all I knew how to do, if somebody tried to show me what to do, I would turn around and just kick her or push, because that's all I knew. That was the language I was able
Right.
to express myself with. But I was very sharp, and I didn't miss much. And that's how it evolved. And that was the process. As I got older, I had special friends who sort of took me under their wing. And I can say that friends like that really can change a person's life.
Wow.
And
Can
that
you?
went on to high school. And then I went to study for a year in Israel. And then the rest is history.
Well, so it's true. Children, could sometimes be very cruel. And you say that friends was a really big asset. Can you tell us a bit, like, was there hard times with with other children? Was there any bullying with children?
It
And
went both ways. I mean, sometimes I bullied somebody
mm,
because when I think about it now, I have tears in my eyes. And because that was my way of being able to feel like I'm in control,
right.
because I felt so helpless with everything else. But I was bullied also as well, definitely. It did get better as I got older. It did.
Mhm.
Um, I think because my language level improved, it was very good. My articulation was good. So as I got older, things did fall into place. And then it wasn't so much an issue. It was more of the much younger grade. Um, my teachers were all, there was nothing to say in terms of any negativity. They were all dealing in the 1970s, in the early 70s, they were dealing with a situation they were not familiar with, and they did the best they could under the circumstances. So I can't even say that I was mistreated. It was more of that when a situation, they weren't informed. They didn't know how to handle certain things. So they did what they had to do. If it was too much, the teacher would say, just go out of the room. And I
Mhm.
was just sent out so many times. And at that time, and even years ago, when I was in my 20s, and I felt just resentment. Now, I don't feel any resentment at all because you realize, you understand where they're coming from. People were just trying to survive, to teach, to make a living. Many people were poor in those days, and they had a family to raise, and they were just trying to do what they could do under the circumstances. So that's something also that I find that I have a lot of compassion now, and it's a very good feeling. But I have friends that I'm still in touch with from my elementary school days and from my high school days, and it's a very, very special connection. I can tell you that, a person cannot do it alone,
Mhm.
and that's it's really special. I'm very
Wow,
grateful for that. Yeah.
that's amazing.